Hi everyone, I'm Tony Lyons. Today I'm going to be covering some useful tips and tricks for Gizmo creation in Nuke. Over the years of collecting and learning from tool creators, inspecting and modifying existing tools, making some of my own tools, and assembling the Nuke Survival Toolkit, I've discovered a handful of useful tips and tricks for making Nuke Gizmos. I'm happy to share some of those with you in this video. Let's get started. If you want to get quicker and better at creating gizmos in Nuke, you have to familiarize yourself with the user knob editing toolbar, which is at the top of the property menus in this little pen icon. If you click it, it will reveal a list of icons that represent knobs that you can add to the gizmo. With the editing mode enabled, just drag and drop some of these icons onto the face of the group gizmo properties, and it will start adding knobs for you. You can click and drag existing knobs to change the order of them and really customize your user interface. So you can kind of move everything along. You can even select multiple knobs and move them at the same time. In order to get rid of a knob that you have on the gizmo, just select what you want to delete and you start dragging it, and a garbage bin will appear on the little bottom left, and you just drag them into the garbage and it is deleted. And you can always undo or redo any changes that you've made. If you want to add a knob from one of the tools that are inside of the group, you can go to the properties of the node inside the group that you want to grab the knob from, and you select the knob and just drag it onto the face of your gizmo. You'll be able to tell when a knob is user created when it has this orange dot next to it, and you can tell when a knob is linked to one of the nodes inside of the group when it has this gray shaded circle next to it. So we can tell the channels and multiply knobs are coming from the grid inside the group. If I disable the toolbar for a second and start moving around the multiply slider, you can see that the multiply is moving in the grade node and in the gizmo face, and that is because it is a linked knob, and that kind of means that it is a cloned knob. So these two knobs are identical, and that's why they move in tandem. So you can see the channels are also changing the grade. The user creator knobs will not do anything by default because you need to link them to a knob inside the group yourself. So let's go ahead and do that with this slider. We can open the properties of the saturation, and by just control dragging this animation menu on this slider here to the saturation slider, we can make a link now so that our knob on the front of our gizmo controls the saturation slider of the saturation node inside. Notice that this is an expression link, so when I change the knob on the front of the gizmo, it's controlling the saturation, but I cannot control the saturation and control the front of the gizmo because the link is one way, so it makes a keyframe, which is fine, you just delete the key. So that is the major difference between the two types of knobs, the user knobs and the linked knobs here. If you remember, I could change my multiply from either direction inside the group or outside the group, and it is changing, whereas the expression link knob is going to change only from the face of the gizmo down to the node that is controlling inside. Let's go back to the editing mode by clicking on the pen. If you want to enter and change the properties of any knob, just click on the orange circle on the knob itself. From here you can change the actual knob name and also the label of the knob, which is how it appears in the gizmo interface. The little eyeball icon will hide any knobs that you want. And you can use the X icon to delete any knob right away. If you need some help remembering what the icons stand for in the toolbar, and you are familiar with the old Manage User Knobs menu, then you can actually just look at this Add dropdown, which has the exact same order as all the icons in the toolbar, and this is the name of that corresponding icon. So it's a little bit of a cheat sheet or a reference for what all these icons stand for, and they're in the exact same order. To demonstrate how fast using the new toolbar is from the old Manage User Knob setup, I did a little test to just time myself to see how quickly I could add all the knobs in the menu in both of the methods. So let's build two identical gizmos with some user created knobs and some knobs linked from inside the gizmo, and we will see how the speed comparison is. Using the toolbar was about 3 times faster than the old Manage User Knob menu. The main reason being that the knobs from the toolbar actually come with default knob names, so you don't have to worry about naming them like you did in the old method. So that speeds you up and allows you to start testing your Gizmo right away. And the second reason is just that it's more intuitive and easier to drag and drop from the properties menu of the nodes that are inside the Gizmo to the face of the Gizmo. Let's talk about inputs on Gizmos. So let's just say we have this small projection setup here, just a project 3D, a card, scanline render, and we'd like to turn this into a group, into a Gizmo. So if you were to select the nodes that you'd like and hit Ctrl G, it's going to give you 4 inputs right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If we jump inside the group, we can see that every single pipe that was available for an input has received an input node. And so we spread them out here because they were on top of each other. So all these have the inputs. The inputs are in no particular order, so you might want to rearrange them or even delete some of them. For example, if we didn't need this background to have an input, we can just delete that. But if we go to the outside of our node, we'll notice that we still have 4 inputs. That's because that we've deleted input number 3, but we still have input number 4. So even though we deleted 3, it still is registering as 4 inputs. So that's not a problem. Just copy and paste and you'll have input 3, and you can delete 4. You can plug that into the camera there. And then when we go back, now we should have only 3 inputs. So you might need to delete the inputs or remake them to make sure that there's the certain amount that you have. So I'm just going to put the inside of the Gizmo side by side with the node graph so you can see what is going on when I change some things. You'll notice that each input has a number, and that's just the numbers that are next to these input nodes. You're going to want to rename your inputs so that they make a little bit more sense to you. There's 2 options for renaming your inputs, and both have to do with renaming the node itself. So by default, it's going to detect any text after the word input, this capital I input word here. So if I put project cam here, you'll see that it's going to label the previously one input as project in. It's going to completely ignore the input in the beginning. Alternatively, you could just rename the entire input, and that's just a matter of choice. Personally, I like to leave it saying input, since I'll know that it is an input when I just look at it from afar. But you can just rename the entire node if you'd like, and so it's a nice clear label of what the input is going to be called. So let's do that for all of our input. I'll name this one image, and I'll name the bottom one, let's call it render cam. So you can see the Gizmo has all the named inputs now, and we know exactly where to plug things into. But you're going to have a problem if you have multiple inputs, which is that if you disable the Gizmo, it can only pick one of the inputs to actually default to pass through. This is the B pipe, or the pass through the Gizmo. So when the node is disabled, where does it look to? And that is called input 0. So each of the inputs starting at 0 labeled, they have numbers, so it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So after you've named your inputs, it can be a little bit difficult to find which input was originally input 0 and is the B pipe. Of course, you can disable the group and just try to sort it out from there. Obviously, right now it's the projection camera, so that's going to be input 0. But there's a clever trick to actually display the input number of each input. It's a hidden knob actually in the input. So if I go to the label of the input node itself, we're going to use a small TCL expression, and we're just going to say square brackets, value, space, and number, and then close the brackets. So the square brackets and value number. So this is going to display a hidden knob called number, and this number is referring to the number of the nodes, and you can see right now it's being labeled. So actually this is the true order of the numbers of the inputs. So you can see that our projection camera was input 0. So that is the default input that is going to be called upon when we're disabling the node. So that's where the node is going to default to. I want my node to default to the image input, so we're going to have to swap these two around. So I'm just going to quickly swap these around, and then I will change the name. So I will say input image. I'm gonna write a 2 so it doesn't conflict for the moment. Then I'm going to rename this to projection camera, and then finally delete the 2. So now I've just swapped these around. You can see that this input, which is number 0, is now at the top, and when I disable the node, I am defaulting to the image input. If your gizmo only has one input, it really doesn't need a label since there is no other input to confuse it with. So you can just go ahead to the input 1 that is created with your gizmo and just delete the 1, and that'll leave your input unlabeled so that it looks a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. For the next example of what we can do, now that we know the input numbers, I've made a small gizmo just as a demonstration, and on the left side here is the actual node graph of Nuke, and on the right side here is just what is inside this distortion gizmo that I've just made. And it's very simple. I'll click on the result here, and it's very simple. I have some noise that is inside of the gizmo being made, and it is being used to drive in iDistort, which is distorting the image. So this is the result of the original image, and now we have a noise driving it, and I've just included the settings of the noise at the front of the gizmo here. So for example, you could change the noise size. So this is just a noise texture driving an iDistort and distorting the image. Let's just say that I did not want to use the noise texture that comes inside of the gizmo, but I wanted to plug in my own texture. Let's say I wanted to plug in this image of fire that I just grabbed online. On the distortion gizmo, I've created a texture input, and there is a switch node in the gizmo. So you can see here the switch is currently going to the noise, the custom noise here, that is inside the gizmo. But if we want to add an image, I've exposed this texture input. By default, the gizmo is not going to know what to do when you plug this texture into it. So we need to tell the gizmo to identify when an input is being used, and from there we can drive this switch. So let's do that now. So we're going to go into the properties of the switch node and go to the which slider here. We're going to add an expression. This expression, we're going to use square brackets. We're going to say exists space parent.input. Now the reason why we have to say parent.input and not just input is because the switch has inputs and the group has inputs. And when we're inside of the group and we're on a node that's already inside of the group, when we say parent, now we're talking about the actual gizmo that's one level above it. So it's referring to the group or the gizmo that the node is inside of. And this next part is where knowing the input numbers is important. So we have image as input 0 and the texture as input 1. And we need to identify whether or not there's an input in input 1, which is the texture. So we're going to put input 1. And then we're going to close the brackets. So this is brackets exists parent.input1. So literally, does there exist an input already connected to input 1? We're going to click OK, and you'll see our expression working. And so now, when we're looking at the result of our distortion gizmo, if we plug in the fire image, you can see that it is changing. And if we highlight the stream inside of the gizmo, so now you see the node graph inside the gizmo is highlighted, you can see that it is indeed switching when we plug in the image. Let's just say that you had the numbers of the switch nodes swapped, so that you wanted the 0 input to be the texture and the 1 to be the noise. Now it's sort of doing the opposite. So with any expression, you can add a exclamation mark to the beginning of the expression, and it's going to do the inverse of the Boolean, which is 0 or 1. So if it's 1, it's going to be 0, and if it's 0, it's going to be 1. So it does the exact opposite. So now you can see, if we look at our switch, so when there is no texture, it is going to 1, and now when there is a texture, it'll go to 0. So that's just because of the exclamation point at the beginning of the expression. So this is a good way of making your gizmo a little bit more dynamic if there's something plugged into one of the inputs. I'm a big believer that for the majority of gizmos that you create, that you're going to want to include a mask and a mix option in the gizmo. It might seem like a trivial thing, but when you're in the heat of production, you don't want to be making dissolve nodes in order to mix your favorite tool or a key mix in order to be using it as a mask when you need it. So you want these kind of basic functions available already in your Gizmo for convenience for when you're using it. So here I have a fancy color correct Gizmo that I've just made, which is basically just a sepia tone. And I'm going to add a mask to this Gizmo so I can isolate where I want it. So let's just say I will make this portion of the image have the color correction. There's many ways to make this mask work with the Gizmo, but I'm going to show you maybe a lesser known way that I found to be very convenient and that I'd like to share with everybody. So the first thing we're going to need is another input for the mask, so we'll make that right now. Input, and instead of 1, I'll just call it mask. So here we have the blank label is the main input, and I'm just checking that yes, it still disables, and then we'll have the mask input. So I'll move this mask down here, and what we're going to want to do is push our stream over. So you could consider this the right nodes here being the substance of our Gizmo, and we're going to make the left just sort of the B stream. Then we're going to make a merge node, just a normal merge node. We're going to set the operation to copy. Now when a merge node is set to copy, it does exactly the same thing as a key mix with a couple exceptions. I went ahead and set up an example of the difference between using a key mix and using a merge set to copy. And the results are identical for the actual image results, but there's a couple things that make the merge node a little more friendly for the use case of the Gizmo. The key mix, you'll notice, is taking into consideration the roto shape from the mask in the bounding box. So even though neither A nor B has any bounding box information outside of the canvas, that when we do the key mix, it's actually taking into consideration the roto shape, whereas the copy node does not. So because neither A nor B go outside of the canvas bounding box, when we copy it, even though our roto is the same, it is not changing our bounding box, which is very nice. The second difference between the key mix and the merge copy comes from what happens when we unplug the mask. So on a key mix, if you unplug the mask, it defaults to the B stream. So basically the key mix says, show me A wherever this mask is. So if there is no mask, it's going to just show B. With a merge copy, however, it's a little bit different. Since the operation is copying A by default, when we remove the mask, it assumes that you want to copy A completely, and so you're limiting the area where A is being copied. So even though they give you the same result, the key mix defaults to the B stream and the merge copy defaults to the A stream. Another way of saying it is, if there's no mask input, show me 100% of A and only limit it whenever there's a mask plugged in. And you can see how this could be very handy for the inside of a Gizmo, so let's add it. So we have the merge copy node inside of the Gizmo, and we're going to connect it so that the B pipe is directing back to the input. And then we're going to plug in the A input to the result of the Gizmo, or the guts of the Gizmo here. So that'll be our color correct. From there, I'm just going to plug the mask of the merge copy into the mask input. And right away, we're going to see that it's doing exactly what we want. We don't get any errors, and we don't get any problems, and when we unplug, we don't have to detect for an input because actually the merge node is doing it for us. So we can see that it's working, we change our mask, and we're getting exactly what we want with no problems once we unplug it. If there is no mask, it's going to default to the A input of the copy, which is our Gizmo guts, our color correction in this case. Now that we have a functioning mask, we actually want to expose some of those settings, and it's incredibly easy with this merge copy. So open up the merge copy properties, and if we turn on the Gizmo editing pen tool, if we just select the entire bottom of the merge node, we can just drag and drop it right onto our Gizmo face. And now we have the exact same setup as you see in the actual merge node on our Gizmo. So you can see that we can change the incoming mask input from alpha to any channel that we want. We have the inject, invert, and fringe buttons, and we also get the free mix slider. So we actually get everything for free with one simple node of the merge copy, and it's super convenient to add to your Gizmo. The next trick involves adding a channels option to your Gizmo. Now this is not going to work in every single case for every single Gizmo, and it's limited to, certain cases. Oftentimes color corrections, Gizmos that are about color corrections, you're able to do this channels option. Also filters, sometimes you're able to do this channel options. But there are certain nodes like blink script or expressions that you cannot do to every channel at the same time. So this won't work in all scenarios, but let's just say you have a case where you could add all channels. I'll show you how to do this actually also with this merge copy. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that the nodes that are contained in your Gizmo are applied to all channels. So in this case, I just have a color correct and a grade, and I'll put them to all channels. But let's just say I add another node, a blur, that will also be set to all channels. So the key would be to make your Gizmo work for all the channels, and then we want to select our channels using this merge copy. So we'd only be affecting the channels that we're copying over in the end. So I've just added an extra layer here called BG, called background, and I just injected another image here of this nice Bavarian landscape. And now we can confirm that this image has multiple layers. If we go here, you can see BG and RGBA. And so let's make our fancy color correct Gizmo work on all the channels. If I open the properties of the merge copy inside of the Gizmo, you'll see that it has this also merge option here. So what I'm going to do first is change the A channel, B channels, and output to none. So now that they're all set to none, the Gizmo is actually not doing anything. If we change this also merge to all channels, then we can just use this also merge to select any channel that we want. For example, just the BG. So I'll put it back to all for now. And if I open up the properties of the Gizmo, we can actually use the editing tool again to once again just drag and drop that to the top here. And instead of also merge, we're going to want to call it channels. So if I just name it channels and then display here channels. So now we have a functioning channels option. You might want to add a divider line just to make it nice and organized. So if I want to confirm that it's working, I can just take a look at my BG layer, and you can see that the color correction is also being applied to the BG layer. Now, if I change this back to RGBA, you can see that it's left alone, or I can just make it affect only the BG layer, and if I switch it back to RGBA, then nothing is happening. So we have a functioning channels option for our Gizmo. I'm going to leave the channels as RGBA for now, so the user has the option to change it to all channels, but it will be default be RGBA. I'll go ahead and delete this viewer from inside the Gizmo. You can see that this merge copy node is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting for us. It's allowing us to add a mask and mix along with a channels option for our Gizmo, all in one node.